day of mourning for the city of Rochester, and in just a few moments, the procession and funeral for fallen officer Daryl Pearson will begin. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca LeClaire.
And I'm Pat Taney, News 10 NBC, bringing you special coverage of the events today. We will be with you as it all unfolds. We have team coverage for you this morning. Nikki Rudd is on Plymouth Avenue and tracking the latest on the procession. We have Rebecca Fath with more on the thousands across the community who are attending today's service, and Brett Davidson breaks down who will be speaking today.
Now, just a little while ago, the Pearson family arrived at the public safety building, and this is certainly a very difficult time for all the members of that family and so many of the people here in our community impacted by the death of Officer Daryl Pearson. As you recall, he was gunned down 1 week ago today while chasing a suspect on Hudson Avenue and Warsaw Street on the north side of Rochester. The 32-year-old had been with the Rochester Police Force for 8 years and had received many awards for his work. He leaves behind a widow and 2 young children, a 4-year-old son named Christian and a 3-year-old baby girl named Charity.
On the same day he was shot and killed, Pearson had dropped off his son to his first day of kindergarten. Certainly a tragic story, a huge loss for the community. First time in more than 50 years an RPD officer has been killed while on the job. We're going to begin our coverage this morning with Nikki Rudd, who is awaiting the procession to begin any moment now. Nikki.
It begins in just a matter of minutes. Thousands of police officers from around the Rochester region and the country are here to honor the life of Officer Daryl Pearson. You can see state troopers at every single corner here in downtown Rochester. Roads have been shut down for 2 hours now. We want to take a look now at our masked camera from our live truck. You can see lining the streets closer to the Blue Cross Arena, a sea of blue. It's truly a sight to see this tribute to fallen Officer Pierson, that huge American flag draped over the road. This has hit the entire Rochester community. An officer shot and killed while protecting our city. We spoke with fellow officer Justin Collins this morning. Here's what he had to say.
It hurts tremendously. It's a huge impact on an entire law enforcement family. Even going to the wake and seeing someone wearing our uniform in that casket was just like, it was overwhelming.
All right, now we are positioned to see the procession as it turns from South Plymouth Avenue onto Broad Street. We are expecting a large motorcade. You can see the bagpipers set up here on Broad Street. We're told RPD motorcycles will lead the way, followed by a tactical car, number 44. Officer Pearson was a member of the tactical units. The hearse will follow along with RPD cars with the pallbearers inside. The funeral is expected to start around 11 o'clock this morning. Pat and Rebecca.
Thanks a lot, Nikki Rudd. From her vantage point in downtown Rochester, we have complete coverage of the funeral service, and we have several crews in downtown Rochester, which shut down around 8:30 this morning because they were preparing for the procession. Yeah, the big focus today, the Blue Cross Arena, as we mentioned, thousands of people expected to pack in there in just moments. Right outside Blue Cross Arena is Rebecca Fath. She's been monitoring things for us there. Rebecca.
Pat, I'm standing here in the middle of hundreds and hundreds of people, but you can barely hear a peep. If you take a look, all of these officers from all across the country have taken about an hour to line in formation in honor of fallen officer Daryl Pearson. We've seen officers from as far as Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, some from Newark, New Jersey, and just all over the country. Now they're waiting to greet the hearse that will carry Officer Daryl Pearson and his wife and 2 children. They're going to be pulling up right behind us here, and then they will be walking around the building to the front entrance. Now, it's just an unbelievable feeling of sadness in the air right now. All of these people here for one man. I actually had a chance to speak to a Rochester police officer who went to the academy with Officer Pearson, and he told me Officer Pearson is so well loved in the community here. He was very popular. Everybody knew him. He was the kind of guy that would put his life on the line to keep our streets safe. We've been hearing that over and over again from all of the people who knew him. So of course we're going to be keeping you up to date on what's happening here. Now expected to speak at the funeral for the first time. We're supposed to hear from his wife, and she will be arriving right here behind me, probably within the next 15 minutes or so. Pat and Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca Fast, standing outside the Blue Cross Arena, talking about just the sea of blue. You could see all the different uniforms for the thousands of men and women in uniform waiting for the funeral procession to come up to the Blue Cross Arena. And it's just really an amazing sight. And she said it was so quiet there.
Yeah,
nobody's talking.
You could see, and it's very emotional right now. As you mentioned, we were waiting for that procession to begin. It was scheduled to begin at 10:30. The casket is going to be moved from the public safety building to Blue Cross Arena. Guests at the funeral will be getting these programs. We've been going through this. It tells quite the story, the life story of Officer Pearson. Really shows the dedication he had to this family and community.
Yeah, and we have Brett Davison. He is one of our other reporters out live. He's on Exchange Street now, and he has a closer look at Officer Pearson's life for us. Brett.
Well, Rebecca, you mentioned how quiet it was out here, and that's really what struck me, that for the last hour, being in a downtown street, just how quiet it is here. It's certainly a somber day, but also a dignified tribute to this public service who spent his adult life protecting others. You can see behind me the sea of blue there, waiting for that procession to come through. And black and blue ribbons are adorning the trees and the light posts around the Blue Cross Arena. People have lined up along these streets, these downtown streets, to pay their respects. We see people in some of the office buildings hanging out their windows to watch this procession come through. Honestly, this procession will be like nothing I've covered in my 24 years of covering news here in the Rochester area. It is very impressive, the show of support by these police officers. They are expecting thousands of people to fill the Blue Cross Arena. I was speaking to Jeff Calkins. He's the director of the Blue Cross Arena. He anticipates about 5,000 people will be inside when this begins. Officers have traveled long distances. They've come from other states. We've heard of officers coming from Florida and Georgia. I was trying to get a look at some of the patches on some of the police officers here. Many from central New York who have driven here from Cazenovia, Cicero, Fulton. We saw police officers from the Connecticut State Police, also from Brantford, Ontario, Canada. So a huge show of support. Let's give you an idea of what's going to happen once this procession gets here and they all go inside. The welcoming remarks will be made by Reverend Mitch Evans of the Cornerstone Christian Fellowship from East Rochester. That is Officer Pearson's father-in-law. He'll give the welcoming remarks. That'll be followed by Lieutenant Governor Robert Duffy, obviously a former Rochester police chief and former mayor, close ties to the city of Rochester. He will be followed by Mayor Lovely Warren, who has been out in front, very emotional in the last week in speaking of Officer Pearson. Following the mayor will be Chief Michael Simonelli, the first chief in 55 years to have to announce the death of an officer at the hands of another suspect. Of course, 1959, Officer Harold Shaw, gunned down while breaking up a burglary. After Chief Simonelli will be Lieutenant Eric Paul, Officer Pearson's supervisor with the RPD Tactical Unit. Following him, Sergeant Stephen Kennedy, another RPD Tactical Unit member, and Officer Rich Ortiz, also with a Tactical Unit. That'll be followed by Father Don Walschlager from Trinity Communion Church. He will make his remarks, and then we'll start to hear from some family members. Brett Pierson, the brother of Officer Pearson. We expect to hear some personal stories of their family life growing up in East Rochester. And then the real emotional eulogy will be given by Amy Pierson, the wife of Officer Daryl Pierson, strong and dignified throughout this entire ordeal for the past week. In fact, the day after the shooting of her husband, she was present at a news conference with the chief and the district attorney announcing an arrest in this case. We expect it to be an emotional tribute to her husband of 10 years. We expect her to talk about his devotion as a husband and a father to their 2 children. They have 2 kids, 4-year-old Christian, 3-month-old Charity. And then the service will conclude with a message of hope from Reverend Evans and a closing prayer by Father Walschlager. For now, though, these officers who have come here to show their respect and their tribute, they've lined up along Broad Street. You can see it here. They'll wait for that procession to come through and then follow the family in. That's the latest from outside.